Good Choices, a holistic conversation about dance, art, and life with Sabine Parzer. Hi everybody, this is Sabine Parzer with another episode of Good Choices, a holistic conversation about dance, art, and life. My guest today is Arye Bursztyn. Arye lives in Tel Aviv. He is a Gestalt therapist and movement teacher at Seminar HaKibbutzim Teachers College. He has a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology, Anthropology and Psychology, a Master's of Fine Arts in Dance from Smith College, Northampton, Massachusetts. He has training in Gestalt Therapy, both from the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland in Ohio and in Israel. Arye is an esteemed colleague of mine who has been performing, teaching, and choreographing as a professional dancer, as well as working as a Gestalt therapist for many, many decades. He has many trainings and he works with a method that he calls body-mind Gestalt Therapy. In this conversation, we talk about Arye's life, his transition from a young boy from his birthplace, Warsaw, Poland, to Israel and his early upbringing in Israel. We talk about his transition into becoming a professional dancer and the realities of working as a professional dancer. And we talk about aging. We talk about the interconnectedness of improvisation, contact improvisation, and therapy, and the many skills that we bring to both fields when we engage in a full embodied sense of self. Please listen and enjoy my conversation with Arye Bursztyn. Hi everybody, this is Sabine. I'm here with my next episode of Good Choices, a holistic conversation about dance, art, and life. And my guest today is Arye Bursztyn. Did I pronounce it correct?
Bursztyn, almost.
Bursztyn. I'm sorry, I didn't do it again. Yeah, Arye is an amazing person. I have to say that. Arye, you are a Gestalt therapist and a movement teacher at Seminar HaKibbutzim Teachers College in Tel Aviv. You have a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology, Anthropology and Psychology. You have a Master's of Fine Arts in Dance from Smith College in Massachusetts. And you have training from the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland in Israel and in Ohio. So you are both an artist, a dancer, a performer, a choreographer, a teacher of dance, and a psychotherapist, which I think is an amazing combination. I know you, Arye. We've met actually the first time, I remember that, in Moscow at the actually outside of Moscow at the Moscow Festival. And I remember we first met at the teachers meeting, but I really, like, the first time I met was at one of the jams. We were kind of rolling around and then moving towards the edges of the jam, and we started making fun of the dancers, and in such a loving, compassionate way. And we started like psychologizing ourselves. And then I found out later that you're not only a dancer but also a psychologist, and it was just such an immediate heart connection, where I felt your heartfulness and your wisdom at this moment. It was just so funny also at that moment. Do you remember?
Sure.
So I'm really honored to have you here, Arye. You're kind of a legend. At least I know you probably don't like hearing that, but I have many Israeli friends, and I was honored to also teach at the Israeli Contact Festival. And from what I've heard, you really brought contact improvisation to the Israeli dance community. Um, so I think everybody that I've met has studied with you over the last 20 or 30 years, everybody at least in the contact community. And yeah, I'm really, really happy that you're here to have a conversation.
Good. I take a deep breath to overcome my embarrassment. It's always amazing to hear the impressions people have, and which definitely are not my own impressions of myself, but it's like probably for everybody else the same.
I would love, I mean, one of the things that I really love about this podcast is that I get to learn about my favorite people in the dance community, and you are one of my favorite people. We have not met very often, but I see the influence that you've had on the community, and the few times that we have met or that we have connected have always been very heartful and very uh, very in depth. And I appreciate that about you as a person, that you bring in not only your love for dance and for movement, but also a love for in-depth humanity and in-depth research into the psychology. And of course, it's something that I'm busy with also, and I'm also really interested to talk to you about that. If we start, do you want to start about sharing how you came, like how was your process? I mean, I read in your bio, which also I didn't know, that you grew up or you were born in Poland, in Warsaw, and then you moved with your family to Israel at the age of 3, I think.
Three.
3. So, how did your early life shape you, and what was your first, do you have a first memory of moving or dancing as a child?
First memory of moving or dancing
As a child
as a
or as a
child.
young
Well,
adult?
the
Mm.
I think my earliest memory is walking on 4 across the kitchen floor. That I remember it as a huge, endless space. uh, so and I remember some moments still in Poland of playing in the snow or jumping from a closet to a bed. So I guess being physical and moving just like any child at age 2, 3, uh, with brothers and cousins, and very male environment. And if you ask about these early formative years of moving to Israel, I the first thing probably that would stand out for me would be the confusion, this moving out, not understanding, not knowing anything, not being informed, definitely
Mm.
not consulted with.
Mm.
So I was like a small helpless entity moved by huge forces all
Mm.
around, not understanding, not knowing. And I don't remember much from the first years in Israel. I guess I picked up the language fairly fast because I know that's what children do, but I some uh, alienation from whatever is around me became kind of part of the essence who I am, like this sense of being outsider and a very strong wish to belong. I
Mm.
wanted to speak only Hebrew. I didn't want to hear Polish. I wanted a very Israeli name. I wanted to be part of everyone and so on, which I'm not sure it worked very well for me, but I don't remember any specific problems, just this drive for connecting, belonging, and a sense of still being having an outsider's position always. And this is something that's the the sense of confusion and this quality of the outsider I am living with. It's kind of ingrained in my skeleton in a way.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's particularly it's a particular situation for people who have immigrated into the land of Israel that was newly formed, or is that an immigration story for you, or is it a family story, or all combined?
I guess mainly it's any immigration thing for everyone, surely for little children. That because being more versatile, maybe adjust fast, but the difficulty definitely is there. Moving to Israel has its unique aspect because Israel, especially in the 50s, was still a miracle, and I had as a 3-4 years child like a very strong nationalistic inclination, like where to be Zionist, to believe, to take part, which I never did very well. But again, the drive was there, and it was like, I don't know if a requirement from the environment, but something in the air that we need to be patriotic in order to live there. But bottom line, it's really about immigration and assimilating into a new culture, new language, new culture, new surroundings, so on.
Is it also a Jewish story? I mean, I don't know your family's history.
Well, from a Jewish point of view and from my family's point of view, I was in a way against the trend because my parents were not Zionistic at all. They were kind of hardcore communists from Poland, trying to build up a brave new world following World War II. But they were Jewish intellectuals in the Communist Party, so they were marked, and they had to. The choice was to leave or go to prison, like for many other Jews in Polish. So, for them, coming to Israel was to come to a place, to the only place in the world where you don't have to be a Jew, because being a Jew loses meaning. Well, everybody is Jewish, so they came in a way being, I don't know if anti-Zionist, but definitely not ideological, and fairly much anti-Jewish. So
Interesting combination.
So that was the atmosphere at home.
Yeah. So how, as a young adult or as a young mover, I mean, I'm assuming from your story also you were already very early had an organic sense of moving or maybe even processing some of those tensions, some of that confusion or alienation. How as a young man or as a young mover did you process that? Was there, when did a dance come into your life, or were you aware that movement was helping you at that? I mean, I'm assuming that it was helping you, but How would you describe that time for you?
Well, I grew up in a neighborhood where what was valued was intellect and intelligence. It was on the grounds of a big scientific research institute, compound in Israel, like the biggest science research place. And so as a child, I was taking trips in tunnels underneath science buildings, and I was getting microscopes for birthdays and encyclopedias and things like that. But the children's culture was to go out and play football or hide and seek or whatever children, so climbing trees and so on. And so the community around me was not at all in favor of physicality, but in school, other places on the street, I was beaten a few times, so and definitely by my older brother also. So I developed this one thing, competitive attitude in sports, and I was dying to find some martial art to kind of shield myself against fairly much violence that was around me at home and on the street and so on. And when the first judo club opened in my town, I immediately enrolled, and so I had really a lifetime affair with martial arts. So that was, as a young person, that was my main interest. Judo, at some point I was Israel's judo youth champion for a while, and I was teaching judo and so on, all the way to military service at age 18. After high school. So all this physicality was channeled into judo mostly, and a little bit into athletics.
And did you feel that it gave you a sense of grounding or a sense of centering? I mean, you said that your main interest was to defend yourself in the beginning, but
Yeah.
also, I mean, what's lovely about the martial arts is that there are really principles that we also work with in contact improvisation and dance,
Yeah, well,
and a sense of coordination and strength.
absolutely, but I see it in retrospect. It wasn't my interest in the moment.
Yeah.
Judo, especially, in a way, a bit like contact improvisation. There is so much friction of body to body, especially in these harsh fabric clothes of judo and the mattresses, and you get a very strong sense of the physical boundaries of the body, because you are being hit all over all the time, and with a large surface, and a lot of strength, of course, and a lot of confidence that is built, because since I started with judo, I was never I almost never took part in fights anymore, because I didn't have to prove anything, and also people were a bit afraid of me. But the main thing really was, on a deeper level, I believe, that especially getting that championship, that the most important thing earned me the respect of my father for the first time, because I was the smallest child and by definition the most stupid and insignificant, comparing to others. And in a way, like the myth of King Arthur, it was my way of getting the sword out of the stone and proving my masculinity, proving my worth. So at fairly early age, I already won. And once I won and I had this experience, I didn't have to win anymore. I've done that already, so I could let go of competing, I could let go of having to prove masculinity. That was already done. That was
That's
very,
very
very
interesting.
reassuring.
I have to say that's super interesting. It's super interesting that you can reflect that, because I would think that, I mean, for me listening, there are many things that come together. It's, first of all, it's sort of still the early stages of the state of Israel, and then immigration family, and then you seem to have, you said that you were in an intellectual family or in an intellectual sort of setting growing up there, and then trying to move into a young masculinity and sort of facing up towards your older brother and your father. And then that could be potentially, for somebody, could be a path where especially a young man continues to compete or continues to want to strive for more or prove themselves. But hearing you say, I won once and that was enough and I didn't have to compete anymore, sounds like a beautifully even reflective place at that time.
Yeah.
Wow. So in a way you already...
I started to be happy with myself.
Which sounds like it was not so easy to come to that place at that time. I mean, in that era also.
No, I never became happy with myself really, but it was a good beginning.
It was a good start. And did it free you up then? I mean, yeah, I see from your bio that you went on to study psychology, anthropology, and sociology. Is that something that you felt that you chose at that time, or was it still something that was sort of given to you by your family?
No. It was really, I had no idea what I'll do towards the end of military service. But at some point during the service I was kind of deeply depressed, and I read a lot, and among other things I read Erich Fromm's Escape from Freedom, and I loved it so much I decided to study psychology. And the next thought was that if I'm to take psychology seriously, I need to go into therapy, to a psychologist, to see is there any hidden motivation that, and so on. So I started therapy, and I finally went and studied. And I studied all three disciplines in the sense, talking of the confused little boy in a new environment, and the sense of being outsider, I called it get to know the enemy, studying sociology and anthropology, really to understand, the intention was to understand this chaotic thing called environment, people, and so on, which I never really figured out, but that was my intention. At the time, at the same time, I started studying dance as a physical hobby, something I had no idea about beforehand, but I had maybe from Judo, people who did some kind of classical style of Judo. That was the way I played with that. The expression was that they do Judo like dancers, which I knew nothing about it, but I had an image that dance is something about deep control, or self-control, and about freedom, which apparently when I did study dance, I understood it was an illusion, but nevertheless I enjoyed this hobby besides the university studies.
Do you have any memories of your early dance classes? Like, how did it feel
Sure.
I mean, it was modern dance, I would assume,
No,
steps and, no?
no, I started with ballet. Modern
Ah,
dance came
classical.
classical
Yeah,
first, then modern, and all the freestyle stuff came many years later.
yeah. But do you remember being in your first ballet class? Like, how did you feel as a young man, also coming out of military school? I mean, I would
Uh,
imagine that even on a psychological level, that must feel really strange,
well, I
besides the
can.
physical aspect of it.
The very first experience was not a formal class. It was I. Well, I'll have to tell the story because I was
Please.
looking for some physical hobby. I was thinking about acrobatics or pantomime or many things that are available today, but at that time I was told they are studied only in theater schools, which no open places to study that. And I went to consult. I was sent to talk to some choreographer that worked at the time with a theater company, and he said he has no idea what I'm looking for. He has nothing to say to me. But I met him in his studio. He said I can stay and watch a rehearsal. It was a rehearsal of some kind of super group of dancers that left their companies to work with this choreographer. And the first thing that stood out is, for me, is a shock of seeing people in tights. I never saw people in tights, women or men. I knew the only thing I knew about dance as a teenager that twice a week girls put on tights under their skirts and disappear. That all I knew. All I knew, and I sat there after at age 21 or so in the in a studio, seeing men and women in tights was shocking. But what they did physically was fascinating. And when they were speaking to each other during rehearsals, like adjusting, communicating verbally with each other, I was so shocked that somehow I understood. I understood what they are speaking about when they spoke about, like, I don't know, shifting weight here and there, or things like that. And I was fascinated, so I came the next day and watched. And after 3 weeks, they told me, "Why don't you buy tights and we'll start, and whoever is free will teach you plié, relevé, tendu, things like that." That's how I started. One of them was one of the dancers was teaching in a studio in the town where my university was. So when I started at the university, I enrolled in that studio and then started systematic classes of ballet and modern dance.
It's I maybe I can just share a story of mine because it reminds
Sure.
me so much. It's a different story, of course, but I remember being at Columbia College in Chicago, and in my early I wasn't even enrolled as a regular student yet, but I came to a performance project and I was late and I was not allowed to participate. And it was Robert Small, who was a fantastic choreographer and modern dance teacher. But I spent days watching the rehearsals, and it was so new to me. But there was something that was in that process of watching that was sort of happening inside of me, where first there was a very big yes on my end, and also what you just shared, a sense of understanding. I don't know the language, I don't know the particularities of what they're talking about or the choreography, but something is landing inside of me. And then later on, they asked me to join because I seemed to be so eager, and I just kind of flutched into it very immediately. And I felt like these couple of days first where I was watching kind of got me ready in order to also physically participate. And it just reminded me of that story because it seemed like something internally landed with you in those hours watching, and also maybe
Yeah.
in adjusting to saying, okay, these are weird people in tights, I don't know who they are, but something is resonating with me on a deep level. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. And then dance is not following an image or not following
Mm.
a sex role or not
Mm.
following some directive from family or anything like that, but an organic, as you, organic development as you describe, this inner yes,
Mm.
that you
Mm.
never know what it will lead you to, but you are already hooked.
Well, obviously it led you into a career which you didn't probably didn't know at the time. I
Uh,
mean, you've been engaged as a professional dancer, as a teacher for 40 years, I would assume now. I
yeah,
don't know how long altogether. Yeah.
yeah, something like that,
Yeah.
or more. Between age 21 and 67 is a bit more.
Mm.
But
Mm.
but when I enrolled to this dance school at that town of my university, the head of the school said, you are welcome to pay us. We'll be happy to get your money, but you will never become a dancer because I was
Of
already
course.
21. And I
Yeah.
said I have no intention of becoming a dancer, but I thought that if by mistake I will become a dancer, it would be a nice episode.
Mm. You were open enough for the experience to see what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
Mm. So in your bio, I read that you later on, I don't know how long the gap is in between, but you actually went to study dance in the US. You have a Master's of Fine Arts from Smith College, which
Mm.
very interestingly, I will talk to Chris Aiken very soon, who's
Mm.
currently, or he's been teaching at Smith College for a very long time. So that's a nice parallel. And Chris
Yeah.
was one of my very first contact teachers, actually,
Mm.
again, back in Chicago. So when did you, I mean, there was obviously some years of development in between, but what was the step to actually say, okay, I'm going to go for a degree in dance. I really want to pursue that also on a professional level. What was the sort of the really the hook that made you decide, okay, I don't really know probably how to combine that with all of my other interests. I mean, I'm assuming that you probably didn't know how that works with psychology or sociology. I don't know, maybe you did.
Yeah, well, at that time I let go of well, I thought I'm letting go of psychology, sociology,
Okay.
anthropology. When I completed the first degree. It was excellent process. I loved it. I was already a teaching assistant, a research assistant on
Mm.
scholarships and fellowships, and some was actually on a direct track to doctoral
Mm.
degree. But I wanted to take a year off for dance, a year off from academy, to dive a bit deeper into dance, and this year continued until now in a way, and from my point of view, I left all the studies behind and went. There is a concept in Judaism about a speech fasting, that you just don't talk. Some people could be for years. So I went on some kind of conceptual fasting for a few years, going fully into dance, and I became professional. I was a soloist in a dance company. I performed abroad in tours and so on, and I quit the company, became a choreographer myself, became a teacher of dance, had my studio in Tel Aviv, and I felt saturated. I was the dance world as I knew it felt very narrow and not satisfying, and there was many things missing there for me, and I was on many levels burnt out. So I performed at some point in New York with a big company actually that was in Lincoln Center, State Theater.
What company was that?
It was called Carmon Dance Company. At the time, doesn't exist. Big company, big theater, live orchestra, relatively good money for a change. Enough money to finance my wife to join me. At the end of performances, we took a couple of weeks or 1 week to travel around, visit friends, pass through Boston, saw Lesley College, where my wife was studying in its branch in Israel. She was studying dance therapy. And seeing the place made it tangible that we could move for a year to Boston. She can complete her degree. And that was decided, and I thought if we come to the US, I might go into some graduate program if I'm accepted. But I thought of it not so much as a career track, but like a rehabilitation sanatorium for myself. I called it
rehabilitation from professional dancing.
Exactly. I
can relate. I can so relate to that. I think we take different forms, but I think most of us have to. We could think about writing a concept about that.
Yeah. There are all these romantic perspectives about dancing, but bottom line, it's such a bloody and sweaty profession.
Competitive, low paid,
high pain,
exhausting.
High pain.
High pain, low paid, abusive, exploitive.
Exactly, and very alienating, really. You are a full-time body, and you use your body as an instrument.
I feel like, I've spent so many years dancing on stage, being a professional dancer as well. I at one point, and I only can realize that now, so many years later, is I actually had to cut off so much of myself in order to perform, in order to show up for rehearsal 6 hours a day. Like, so much of what I'm doing now in my work, and I'm assuming you're also doing, is about connecting and sensing and getting to, sensitize the body and perception and relating to ourselves and to others. And in the reality of professional dance, you do that on a very small scale because you have to cut yourself off so much in order to prevail. And I mean, when you're young, you just kind of do that, and I was loving what I was doing. I was loving performing. I was also loving the competition and wanting to make it also. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there was a lot of ambition on my end as well. I'm not just blaming the system here, but it is so competitive, and it is so harsh. The conditions are so harsh, and it's the realities of it is I think it's even less romantic than in some of the stories that are being told. I mean,
Mhm.
even if you look at the movies of fame where, people are just auditioning and auditioning, I mean, the reality is even worse, right? I
Yeah,
don't know how you experienced it, but for me it was like that.
absolutely, absolutely. And but my image of it was more like living in a monastery, like life
Mm.
that is in
Mm.
total regime, that is totally, let's call it low fat kind of life.
The theater regime.
the,
Mm.
the,
Mm.
the yeah, like Shaolin something,
Yeah, yeah.
which is very harsh, and I loved it, and most of the people who are there really admire the hardship, and we
Yeah.
find value in it. It's very masochistic, of course, and it's very, you can call it immature, but we
Mm.
do love it, and we to some extent addicted
Yeah.
to, whether to the competition, whether it's not even so much to the applause of audience, which is a bonus, but really to the struggles and sweat of the studio in
So
professional
I want to
dancing.
stay there for a moment. Want to continue because I know that there's some goodies at the end of your stories or in the middle of your story, actually, where we are.
Plenty
But
of goodies.
I've plenty of goodies. But like for me, it's always been so interesting because I know, like I know I love performing, and I know I'm in a way also performance junkie. I mean, like even doing a podcast, in a way, is for me a way of performing because I'm showing myself. I'm having a great conversation with you, but it's being recorded, and yeah, and I know that it's also about gifts wanting to be lived and information being passed on. But I think exactly what you're talking about, this, and I know it's not specific to dancers. I think it's specifically hard with dancers, but it's also with athletes or like anybody who does an extreme sport or an extreme sort of high competitive profession in terms of, acting or yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, there are some severe sort of circumstances that surround any of these professions. But
Sure.
what do you think, even at the core of it, is it just about um, is it just about like a lack of being seen as a child, or a lack of getting enough sort of recognition, or do you know what I mean? Like, are there only like sort of these negative aspects of ourselves that sort of want to be compensated as a performer, or do you also see that there is something really healing in performing, or there is something really that like we okay, I maybe sorry I interrupt myself here, but I at one point I made a decision in my life to only perform in places where I feel comfortable and where I feel like it's a gift rather than a competitive situation. And I feel like it makes a huge difference in the quality of how we are giving ourselves to an audience or to the art form when I come from a place of richness, a place of sharing, a place of not straining or not. Um, in German, we call it Mangel, sort of this lack of. Yeah. So do you see, like, my question to you is, do you think on a psychological end, is it mostly driven by sort of the negative aspects, or do you also see the positive aspects in performing?
Well, one thing is I wouldn't psychologize dancing too much, because then we would go and looking into resolving of complexes, of sublimating all sorts of drives, which I'm not sure is interesting for me. But one thing we spoke of about this organic need to move, that the love of movement.
Yeah.
And people love football or basketball or ping pong for the same reasons. Just the joy of movement. And another thing, it's very kind of not academical to talk about, there is the issue of talent, whether it's in poetry or music or mathematics, that once you are doomed, or blessed, or
With
whatever.
with a talent,
With
you
a
mean?
talent, yeah. And
Yeah.
then if you are a mathematician, you'll find yourself living a whole life with mathematicians, and I'm not sure it's the most pleasant life on earth. but that's your life, or music, or dance, or basketball.
You mean it also becomes a calling rather than
Yeah.
a profession?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And a calling has something to do with a soul aspect. I think James Hillman talks about that. Like, I think there's something also in like like when we're really really listening, we also need to listen to our calling, and if we're following our calling, there's a deep level of satisfaction that we can grow into, and that I think that has a different quality than performing, because we just need to be appreciated, right?
Yeah. There are much better ways to be appreciated than in dancing. I think. But to one of the many times I wanted to quit dance, a colleague told me, when you get a gift from God, you keep it. One does not return gifts. As simple as that. And it touched me. But on the other part of it, like the downside of it, is for me as dancer, performer, partly as teacher, but mostly as choreographer, as like full-scale artist, I loved the work, and I deeply disliked myself in it. I disliked the egocentric aspect of directing or choreographing pieces. I dislike the sense that everything is subordinate to my creative impulses and so on. And I love the work, and I let go of it eventually when I moved into doing therapy, kind of with a relief, in a place that I can feel better with myself, which is still, as as I said, a work in progress.
Do you feel like both aspects of yourself, the therapist and the artist, are still like, are they equal within yourself or within your professional life, or do you feel like one has more weight than the other now?
It's difficult for me to say. I don't. There is no way of measuring, of course. But
internally?
In terms of way of perceiving it, I would use the Gestalt terms. Being an artist or performer is definitely my background. What's in the foreground right now is relatively more the therapist. I still work with dance people, with theater people. Right now I'm involved in some theater production where I do the movement for after. I haven't done that for years. Production, by the way, of Bertolt Brecht, good soul of Sichuan, good person of Sichuan. And I meet this egocentric person, and it kind of makes me laugh a little bit. Kind of, now more of a forgiving laugh, but so they are there, they coexist. But I mostly these days mostly involved in therapy or training, body mind Gestalt therapy, stuff like that. Yeah. Even though I'm teaching dance still, but low scale.
I want to get into the body mind Gestalt therapy, but before I ask you that, I still want to tie the dance over in the sense that, do you feel like the skills that you learned as a dancer, I mean, I'm talking about physical skills, but also internal skills, improvisational skills, creative skills, do you feel like you are still able to use them in your therapeutic work? I mean, is it something that is helping you that maybe if you just had therapy training, you weren't able to access those skills?
Absolutely. And as a trainer in training programs, I use a lot of movement. But the things that are mostly relevant are not the early training in the rigid forms of classical ballet or old style Martha Graham modern dance, but mostly the improvisational and contact improvisation, which are really, I see it as almost a pre-requirement, a way of embodying the ethics and the practice of Gestalt therapy. And from my point of view, I had a 20 years introduction to therapy through the bones.
That would be a great title for a book. 20 years introduction to Gestalt therapy. Wow. Yeah. Could you elaborate a little bit more, especially for people who don't know contact improvisation, maybe even describe it? And in what way was that a preparation for therapy? I mean, I think I have a sense of it, but I think it's such an internalized journey also.
Yeah. Well, there is, this riddle. Somebody calls you on the phone and tells you, explain contact improvisation to me, please. And it's kind of, futile attempt, but my image for that is, let's say that you sit with a good friend in a conversation, and your 2 years or 1 year old baby is crawling all over you and climbing over you and rolling down, and while maintaining this serious conversation, you keep supporting and playing and bumping and so on, and your baby laughs sometimes or gets scared sometimes, and you have you have fun, and it's completely obvious. You were there. Almost everybody was there, either as the adult or the baby. And in contact improvisation, we are both. So that's my image.
Lovely, lovely. I don't know if people now know what it is, but it's such a lovely entrance.
That's the
Yeah.
best image I have. It's this
Yeah.
game we play physically
Yeah.
with each other.
And do
Uh,
you think, like, if we bring it back to the therapy or that 20-year long preparation, do you feel like it has to do with presence, with like listening to another body, like listening to yourself while you're engaging with another body, or like what are the specific communication skills also involved that you learned?
yeah, I would say all of the above. The thing about contact improvisation, talking of contact, we speak of it naturally in terms of touch. But you know very well, as one who practices contact improvisation, the touch is great, but it's not the point. You don't touch the point of contact, you touch the person. And the point of contact between you, where you touch, is just a mediator. You touch the shoulder, but you feel the grounding of your partner. You touch the I don't know, the back, and you feel the direction and velocity of the flow, and so on. So the point of contact, the point of touch, is like just like an antenna for a lot of information to be passed through in order to be able to coordinate somehow, or as you said, to communicate. And this communication, this kind of communication, to collaborate, to coordinate, to listen, to be in dialogue, can be with or without touch. I think all of us who practice or teach contact improvisation and were challenged by Corona, we developed our own tricks to bypass touch and still remain in contact, or teach, or play, or create solo underscores, and so on, or jams in rooms on Zoom, whatever we did. And I see contact improvisation in this sense of developing antennas. And yes, as you said, from a clear center, with a kind of open, non-judgmental mind, with ability to accept a lot, and at the same time to remain very ethical and with clear boundaries, where the improvisation is based on yes, which means there are clear no when necessary, and so on. And in Gestalt therapy, there is a wider meaning for the term contact. It's like one of the most basic elements of Gestalt therapy. As conceptually, contact is the way we are in an environment, and we are being part of the whole, which includes us and the environment. And the contact is where the action really is, where we blend, where we are a unity with environment, and where we are impacted and impacting. And from point of view of Gestalt, really to be kind of fundamentalist around that, any psychology, or at least Gestalt psychology, is a psychology of contact. Is a really research or therapy of contact.
It's relationship, right?
In the widest sense, relationship like a single cell has with its environment, or relationship like business has with the market, and it's being part of.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's like a river. Coming back to contact improvisation imagery, contact of the river and its banks, but without banks there is no river. And without the river there is no point in banks. They co-create each other.
When I hear you talk both on the artistic or moving end of the spectrum and on the therapy end of the spectrum, there is such a breath that I take when I listen to you. When you describe that first, about that it's not the place of touch, but it's about the action of listening that's actually happening, or the information beyond that particular place. I felt myself breathing so deeply, because I've been involved in dance and in the contact community for many years now, many decades actually, and I lose that sense somehow that, I love the fact that contact is so popular and that there are so many jams everywhere, and there's, it's going to happen again. I know there's going to be festivals again at one point. But I'm also sometimes feel like it's lost that sense, like in sort of, I call it the boogie style contact, or the sort of leisure, let's just kind of go to a jam sense of contact, which is totally fine. Also, I'm happy that so many people are doing it, but there is so much depth behind it. And what you just mentioned, what you just talked about, is that depth of perception, but also depth of relationship. And it's not just person-to-person relationship, it's relationship to space, it's cellular relationship, it's even relationship to backspace or psychology. And I agree with you. For me, contact is like an entrance into a depth of experience that you can then take in different directions. You can take it into an artistic direction, or a therapeutic sensibility, or just recreational practice. You can take it with wherever, but I feel like what you were talking about brings in basically just brings in a level of quality and integrity that that I love about the work, and I feel like sometimes it's missing now. And on the other hand, and I know this from a lot of therapeutic contexts, I feel like what you're bringing in with your level of experience is a full sense of embodied. I know this word is overused. I talk about it that it's overused, but still a sense of embodied contact, an embodied sense of listening, and a deep level of experience also that we might not only get to through language, or we might not only get through sitting next to each other, and so there again you bring in a depth or a level of experience that might not have been possible if you had only done one or the other. Thank you for articulating that also. We're way over time here. I was gonna make this much shorter, but it's so rich, Arye. I could talk to you for a very long time.
Let's not apologize.
Let's not apologize for that. No.
For having fun.
Yeah, and for me, there's really something about that. Also understanding your story, and understanding like your psychology of how you enter dance, and also the cultural and social background. It forms us, and it forms our quest. It forms our journey. And also hearing it touches me that you say you're still working in dance, but your main focus is on the therapeutic aspect of it. Do you feel like that also has something to do with just an organic process of getting older, or or changing into a different phase of your life, not necessarily physically getting older, but just shifting your interest on a more, I don't know, on a more one-on-one level even?
Well, I
I
would
don't know what
say,
aspect of that is important. Yeah.
looking back, I would say that interest in the therapy or relatively therapeutic options was related to maturing. Then the fading out of the dance is more related to aging.
Mm.
It's not like it's different processes.
Yeah.
But yeah, dance unfortunately is fading away gradually. Being an active dancer becomes more and more rare and more difficult and limited, obviously.
Is how do you cope with that? I mean, is that a conscious decision to also simply say that's just a fact and I'm still a mover, but I don't need to overextend my body also? I mean, it can be also quite healthy to simply say, I don't want to push myself that hard anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that. Also really am a bit tired from this kind of regime. But really, the main thing that I would say the main excuse, in order not to take too much ownership, not to be too mature about that, would be that the decisive force were injuries.
Yeah.
Just the obvious, blatant limitations.
Mm.
So injuries were the main guide.
And it's a reality. I mean, it's a reality of our profession. Yeah.
And
Like with many athletes, it's an overextension of the body's physicalities and its skills. And I mean, some of us navigate through that very well. I mean, when I met you, which was, I think, 13, 14 years ago, you were still very active in dancing. You were teaching, and still, I mean, before that, as professional dancers, we retired at, people retired at 35 maximum.
Yeah.
So I think if we're even managing to dance into our 40s or 50s, that's a huge development already.
Yeah, here and there I'm still dancing, but I'm insecure about that. I very aware of vulnerabilities that are there.
Mm.
Definitely not able. I'm not competing with who I was, so I'm
Mhm.
so as you said, yeah, there is a reality that just needs acceptance, and
Yeah.
to some extent, I'm accepting. If you ask how I cope with that, to some extent, I'm trying still to push here and there,
Yeah.
or to stay in shape, or to whatever, take care of supplements or eating, drinking, la la la. But it's maintenance work, and for sure, as I said, we are in a long process of rehearsing for the final production.
And I think there's something also. I mean, I'm younger than you are, but I'm also getting older. I mean, I just turned 50 this year, and I'm quite busy with the process of accepting change. And even though I see change in both directions, like I see that on some levels I have more skills than I did before, and I'm also recuperating, even though sort of my stamina has gone down, it's going back up again. And so I feel like it's not a final end point. It's not just all going downhill. I can see that, but I also like and that's probably why I asked you this question also. I also see that it's not necessarily easy for dancers to retire or to age graciously, because we're so identified with our bodies and our skills as dancers. And I sometimes wish for just some some acceptance to the fact that we've really done extraordinary things with our bodies, and to just really be kind to our bodies and say it's okay. It's okay to be slower. It's okay to just roll around the floor and pass on whatever we know through the body that we have right now, because there's like all of your experience, all of my experience is still there, and especially your wisdom is still there. I mean, it's very clear. So
And
hmm.
no, there is a Gestalt saying for the therapist, borrowed from meditation practice. First thing, stay with what is.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
this is what is. I am who I am. There is no point in quarreling with it.
I think that's actually a really beautiful end point right here.
Right?
If we're talking about the composition of a podcast, we could have gone many more directions, and
Sure.
hopefully we'll do this again. But that's a beautiful end point. Thank you so much, Arye. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure
Mm,
having this opportunity to meet like that. Thanks,
yeah.
Sabine.
I hope to meet you in person again soon.
Inshallah. Amen.
Bye. Bye bye. Ciao.
Ciao.
If you would like to know more about holistic dance and the Holistic Dance Institute, please visit us at our website www.holistic-dance.at. Holistic dance is an invitation to transformation through dance, movement, and touch. It was founded by me, Sabine Parzer, in 2010. It is a mix of different methods, a dynamic cross-method approach from dance pedagogical, dance and body therapeutic, systemic and holistic methods. We offer authentic movement, integrative contact improvisation, somatics and applied anatomy, improvisation, ecosomatics, and many more elements. I offer holistic dance workshops, I offer single sessions, I offer teachers trainings, embodiment trainings, advanced teachers tracks, year groups, and retreats. I would be very happy to see you at one of our events. And if you have any questions, please write me an email.